And so we'll move on from there. One of the things that, excuse me, I'll go ahead and share concerning this title, Hanging in the Balance. When Pastor Woody shared with me what was on his heart by way of a title, it resonated with me right away because that is exactly where I found myself. That was the situation. And so mentally, this title describes what it felt like. And so when we talk about hanging in the balance, some of you, if you'll just type in the comments what you think that means or what comes to mind when we think about hanging in the balance. We're going to move forward, tying this into a very important scripture, one of my very favorite scriptures from the Word of God. But in the meantime, what hanging in the balance, what comes to mind? I'm going to look at the comments here and see what some of you have to say about hanging in the balance. Hanging in the balance. And then I'll give my comments. Anybody have any thoughts about hanging in the balance? Have you ever found yourself hanging in the balance? I see some people that I want to greet here too. Angela, Carmela, Tracy. Of course, Bishop Muhendi is with us. Minister Edward Fleming, our GTM family. Of course, I've greeted Dr. Lynn Walker. Welcome, welcome. This may be your first time with us, I'm not sure. But I see Denise, and along with, again, our Grace Transformational Ministries family. Let's see who else I see here. Hanging in the balance. Somebody talk to me, if you would, about hanging in the balance. What are your thoughts? Oh, being stuck in a decision. Good one, Barb. Sheila says, oh, another good one. The uncertainty of the unknown. Definitely. Anybody else? Those are great responses. Looks like some of this technical difficulty is with Facebook. Carolyn Jones, good morning. Oh, goodness, my sister and classmate from Virginia. Hanging in the balance. So, both Barb and Sheila were right on target. When something is hanging in the balance, being in suspense, yes, Julie. The unknown, critical. When you're hanging in a balance, it's sometimes the extreme of that is life or death. It's a teeter-totter, meaning it could go one way or the other. It's unknown, and so the balance is just hanging there. I don't know if you can see this on the scales on the screen or not, but if so, you can see those scales. And so when I learned that the biopsy that I had was positive for cancer, that's right where I was. And it's a reality. Things are hanging in the balance. And what tips the balance one way or the other, it is largely dependent upon decisions. And so hanging in the balance is actually, if we would be real, it's a very scary place. And so we definitely need God's help, God's grace, because we're human and we have a soul. And so when you're given information that's life or death, then it's a huge reality check. And so it could go any way. It's just uncertain. There are all kinds of unknowns. There are all kinds of questions. And it could be life or death. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. And in my case, and in the case of those of us who are believers, we believe what the outcome is going to be because we believe God's promises. We believe God's word. But when you get the news, you are hanging in the balance because there are so many unknowns.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was right on, honey. Thank you. When we're in this series that we're talking about and focusing on decisions, I am So excited to have Thomasine with me because during this particular time in our lives, and this is a big chunk of our lives since what 2011, this 10 years now, um, where we've had to make decisions concerning this. And as Thomasine mentioned, these were, I mean, with in other words, uncertain of the outcome, hanging in the balance. Your decision about your health leaves your future hanging in the balance. You're not quite sure what's going to happen there. So I do have a question for you, and also, I'll have a question for Thomasine as we move into this. But the question for you to think about while we prepare for the next question is this. I'll put it on the screen for you. That question is, how do you make better choices for your best life and follow through with daily actions? In other words, a lot of the time because just because you make a decision doesn't mean that you're going to do anything about it. And so, but decision is the first step. One of the things that I've learned is that what brings activity to decisions is actually your emotions, and so it takes both of those. But so if you're kind of just out of you have no feelings about it, you may or may not make the decision. But how do we make better choices for our lives and actually follow through with it? Thomasine mentioned already, even last week, she's mentioned that things slowed down for her when she found out, and she had to accept the fact that and she admonished us to accept the fact that you have to do something. You can't just not do anything because of the stress that it creates. For one reason is the stress. But Thomasine, I wanted to ask you another question. How did you feel when it came close to the time for your annual exam before, so I want to back up a little bit. Before the actual diagnosis, even years before, every time there was your annual exam, what were some of your feelings that were going on?
Throughout the whole thing, I was and am still just so grateful to the Lord, because even though the reality of cancer was there, and that reality just of the magnitude of cancer in general is still there, I was always so grateful and just amazed at how God has been in every single detail. When I get to complete the book, you'll see some of those things, but just real specific, tiny details that I know had to come from the hand of God. So I was grateful, I was hopeful, but pardon me, I think my main emotion was just numbness, because I did not expect it. And it was, I wasn't so much in a mode of why, but how did this happen, and how did this happen again? Because I was so vigilant, and people who know me well know how I am about food. Now, I love food, I do, but most of the foods that just by nature I really love, I don't eat. And so it's so when it came to nutrition, when it came to exercise, when it came to drinking water, I thought, Lord, what else could I do? And so I guess one feeling would be like a type of powerlessness. I realize how vulnerable, even more how vulnerable I am, how little control I have. And so I really did feel helpless and shocked. That was another feeling, because again, I didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm. So what we just want to relate to, because I know everybody goes through those feelings, and usually you probably don't hear about that at church, but we want to share behind the scenes kind of stuff that a lot of times, when we're in church, we want people to feel like we don't want anybody to see us while we're going through. We want to go through and then come out with our hands up saying, God did it, and look at how excited we are and how great God is and how faithful I have been. I had the faith and all that.
Right.
when really you've been through. And many people don't even relate to that because when they're going through, they don't feel all that. And you don't feel that while you're actually going through. Even sometimes when you're going through, I know that, prior to the actual diagnosis for years, I would go with you to your mammogram appointments just for support. And I know some of you ladies, you have that same kind of fear. You need some support. You need somebody to go with you. So husbands, men, be supportive. Thought I'd throw that out there and be a good chance to be supportive. But even in all of that, you have to decide to be healthy. And so that's one of my questions for you today. Have you decided to be healthy? Have you decided that I want to live healthy? I do care about the rest of my life, because one of the things that I've discovered in the last few years is this, and that is just because you're not sick does not mean that you are healthy.
Exactly.
Now, did you want to say something about that?
No, one thing that's going through my mind right now is that we have a physician joining us this morning. And so I just want to say, Dr. Walker, please be free to comment at any point because we need it. And other thought that I had is that even though they found cancer cells and the mammogram came out positive for cancer both times, in 2012 and 2020, I believe that the decisions that we made decades ago about red meat, about pork, about what we put in our body, about exercising, made a difference. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a dear friend of mine said to me when I was diagnosed in 2012, she said, Thomasine, you're not going into this with a deficit. She said, so that is a real blessing. And I believe that. And my oncologist this time, even when we had our first consultation this go round, when he looked at the report from the biopsy and some of the other data, he said, when I look at this, and he talked about, the technical stuff, he said, this tells me that your immune system is doing a good job of fighting this off. And I believe it's all because of decisions, and not all because we know it's the Lord, but he enabled me, gave me the grace to make the decisions. And so last week when we talked about decisions being seeds, those seeds yield a harvest, as we said. And so when we make those day-to-day decisions about what to put in our bodies or what not to put in our bodies, those decisions matter, even though we believe, well, I just have one more piece of cheesecake. Those decisions matter. Not that we have to live a life of deprivation, but we need to make the quality decisions on a day-to-day basis so that the culmination or the accumulation of those decisions will be to our benefit.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time when we got the diagnosis. Well, actually, I think it may have been the first time after the first diagnosis. Your surgeon, the doctor that was a surgeon, she said, "Thomasine, you're not sick. Yeah. You just have this disease that we got to get rid of." Mm-hmm. And so because you didn't feel sick, you didn't feel anything, but at the same time something else was going on in your body. And I love the way that you mentioned about what some of the things that have happened since really almost 30 years ago, we decided to change some of our eating habits. And I am so glad we did, because I'm sure I would have been terrible because of all the sugar I was eating. I was a sugar. And but since then, what I've done and what God has enabled me to do, with some of the decisions that we have made, is I've been able to change my habits, change the way that I do some things. But I do want to bring a scripture in before I really talk about this in any more detail. I want you to turn with me in some scripture, because I believe God has something to say about this, and Paul, being inspired by God, has said plenty about this, even though in the book of First Corinthians in the 6th chapter. This is Paul's letter to the Corinthian church, and he's addressing pride, he's addressing selfishness, he's addressing sexual sins in this chapter. But this city of Corinth had gone through a lot of, well, when I say going through, this church, he's sending a letter to a church that was really about 4 years old. But the city of Corinth was ideal. This was the ideal hub for commerce between Italy and Asia. In other words, the culture had things going one way, really one way. I was going to say one way or the other, but mostly one way. And so it was more of an immoral city for that day. And today I just want to bring that application into our health life. And instead of focusing on sexual sins, I want you to look at what Paul said here and consider your health when it comes to that. He said, he's talking to them because of what they have said. He's received the letter. And he's saying, I have the right to do anything you say. So obviously that's what they have been saying. And honestly, that's the way we feel sometimes. We feel like I have the right to do what I want to do. I have a right. God is, that's especially us Americans, that's I have a right to do this. That's my right. But Paul said, but not everything is beneficial.
Right.
So you may have a right to do some things, but if it doesn't benefit you, you should make the choice not to participate, or at least to participate at a reduced rate than you normally would if these things affect you in a negative way. He also said, you're saying I have the right to do anything. Then he said this about himself. He said, but I will not be mastered by anything. So I have a right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. And I like the way he said this in the New Living Translation, and that is this. He said, I'm allowed to do anything, and he said, but not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. So we can't allow the patterns of our culture to woo us into moving in the same direction that the culture is. When we look at patterns, it's not like you just look outside of yourself and you see something different, and that's the pattern I'm talking about. Patterns are, even in your own mind. You're growing up in a culture. You're affected by the things that you see and by the things that you hear, by the things at work, things at school. If you remember last week, I shared a picture of this iceberg like on top of the water, where when we look at culture, we think about dress, we think about foods that we eat, the language that we speak, the music that we listen to, the games we play, all of those things. But underneath all of that are our real beliefs, real values. Beneath all of that is, how we handle our ethics, how we handle our emotions. All of those things are, part of our culture, and it influences our health, beliefs about ourselves. It influences our health. Just for a little review, last week we also, and Thomasine talked about this as far as our culture when it comes to health, where there's a mental stigma as far as mental health. There's a stigma concerning mental health. Same thing with depressions. If there's a person that's diagnosed as with depression, we don't want to talk about it, and we try and hide all that. They don't even want people to know that they see a therapist. They don't even, all those kinds of things, where we have a tendency to look for medicine to cure something rather than try to figure out what the root cause is so that I can really be healthy. We have a tendency to take a pill so that I take my sugar pill. You've heard people say this, take my sugar pill so that I can still eat what I want to eat.
Right, and that triggers something that I hear a lot. People who are on medication, for example, for high blood pressure, hypertension, or diabetes, who are on medication, if you're not careful, you can get duped into thinking that everything is all right, because a typical comment is, my numbers are good.
Okay.
My blood pressure is good. Well, in actuality, your blood pressure is not good. It's good because you're on the medication.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we it's like we can be at one extreme or the other. Either we treat or have this view of medication and medicine like it's our enemy, or once we receive it for a certain condition, then we abdicate our responsibility to do anything else, because now, okay, I could eat this and then I'll just take my medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a trick of the enemy. It really is. And that it actually infuriates me, because I see so much potential.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like unlearned people say this. A lot of times these are people who read, and I don't mean uninformed. They're still informed, but yet you can get duped when you see a certain number and into thinking you're okay. Just like many people do who, with certain mental health conditions, for example, bipolar disorder, once the mood is stabilized, then the person is feeling good. And who likes to take medicine? Nobody. I detest medicine, but I'm thankful for medicine. And so many times a person who suffers from bipolar disorder, once their mood is stabilized, they're feeling better, that's a question, then now they stop taking the medicine, and now they're thrown back into the cycle again. So that's what came to my mind. Also, right now, there are a couple of questions that Tracy had. I don't know if you want to respond now.
Sure.
But Tracy asked if we had a specific eating regimen, and if we have consulted a nutritionist, or if we've used trainers. And I was thinking, before we respond, I wanted to share something that's important too, because you need support and you need commitment to make certain decisions. Before Pastor Woody and I got married, when we knew we were going to get married, we made a decision that we would do everything we possibly could to stay healthy. We made that commitment to each other. And it's not like it's been easy, but again, God has given us the grace, and it's been to our benefit. So I don't know if you want to respond now to Tracy's questions. I responded in part to you, Tracy, on here, but we want to talk about it openly as well.
Okay. Sure. One of the things that, we did early, as far as trainers, physical trainers, we did get in touch with some physical trainers. We did some of that. As far as our health, I can think of 3. I was doing a lot of traveling, and I still had a personal trainer in another state where I was. And when Thomasine was with me, she would actually train both of us. And we got some good information from all of our trainers, a couple of them that right here in Michigan, where it wasn't just about, being physically fit, but they had gone through the training themselves, so they could teach us to help, change some of our eating habits and some of those things. When it comes to me, as far as eating habits, one of my worst things was sugar. When I was grown and still, around my dad, he used to watch me drink coffee, and he'd just shake his head, and he wished he knew what to say to make me change my mind. He would just say sometimes, "Woody, that is not good. That is not good." And I would say, and I would think about it, and back off a little bit. I remember one time when I was doing this, I was at work, and I worked with a couple of people, and they saw me putting sugar on my Frosted Flakes, and they just absolutely could not believe it and stopped me right in my tracks. One guy just took it and said, "No, we're not going to let you do that." And I'm sure Thomasine was glad they did. But one day, Thomasine was at work, I remember, and I found this book that you already had, I believe, on the bookshelf by Charles and Francis Hunter. Said, "Are You Tired?" I think is the name of the book. And there was such a great explanation of what sugar does for us. That day, Huh? To us, yeah, to us, what sugar was doing to us. Um, that day, I changed my mind about sugar. I changed, so it took information, and I realized what was happening to me, and I could see what was going to be happening in the future. And so it's amazing from that day to now, and that's been 30 years ago almost now. And from that day to now, many times when we, especially when we bake or cook something with sugar in it, the sugar that's in the container has a crust on it because we haven't used it in so long. And so, so it's not that we totally gave up sugar, but we we hardly ever use sugar. And same thing with some of the meats. When you talk about nutrition, we took both beef and pork out of our diets as far as what we purchase for groceries. We don't buy beef. We don't buy pork to cook at home. If we do, we don't eat pork. Period. Um, but if I do eat beef sometimes, it's mostly times it's when I'm out, if I'm at a restaurant and I just want something different, and that may happen a few times a year. And it's not that I track it because I know most of the time we don't eat that meat, and when I think about how much meat we eat during the week, we probably don't eat. There are weeks that go by where we don't eat any meat, and we probably eat meat once or twice a week when we think about it from that
Right.
perspective. Um,
I was just thinking about just that decision it would to change our diet. It came as a result of being on a Daniel fast in probably 1992, and we felt so much better in our system. We immediately saw a difference in our system, the way our body was functioning, and so we made that change. And so as far for me, for the last several years, um, probably for 2 years, I haven't done chicken, um, and I was doing some turkey, but for a couple of years I went veganish. I'd call it. Now I'm stricter in terms of a regimen. What I have found for my body is um, eliminating, especially animal products and dairy, does my body good. And there's research that supports that it does everybody's body good. But so for me, especially when it comes to allergy symptoms, sinus stuff, and all of that, eliminating dairy, and also because the particular kind of cancer that cells that they found was very sensitive to estrogen, it behooves me to avoid anything that is going to cause my body to produce estrogen or that has estrogen in it. And so when you start talking about chicken and turkey and those kinds of things, they pump chickens and cows with all these hormones, and it's affecting our bodies. And so again, this is where information comes in. For me, for exercise, I do better. I'm thankful for Barb, who is my walking buddy. She's been so faithful in helping me rebuild my strength by getting out there walking with me. And I know she doesn't always need to go or maybe even feel like going, because sometimes by the time we finish she has 15,000 steps or so. So but I'm really grateful for that. But for me, having a partner and a group works for me. So jazzercise has been wonderful for me, and I haven't been able to go, of course, because of COVID for a long time, but now I'm about to enter back into jazzercise. I do some. I'm not as faithful as I should be about home exercise, but it's so important. And one of the basic things I know too that helps me is just water. I pretty much carry a water bottle around the house or wherever I am. So those are some of the things in particular. I did work with a naturopath, Dr. King Mason out of Texas, for a couple of years. That was really helpful. So we want to take care of body, soul, and spirit.
Amen. Um, Thanks again. When we look at all those changes, it took some time to change those mindsets. Those are thinking patterns, you know, because of what our reality was. You know, we had so many, and each one of you, each one of us, we're at different places, and when we have thinking patterns. One of the things that I learned, and I want to share this with you. One of the things I learned, I'm going to put an image on the screen here for you. One of the things that I learned just from reading, especially about decisions and how the brain works, is that we have these thinking patterns that our brain go through. We think we see things, and this is just an example of visual decisions we make from visual things. We see things and we think it looks one way, and we think we just see with our eyes, but you really do see. When you see something, it brings an image to your brain, and based on what you've seen in the past, and based on what you're seeing now, and based on the emotions that you had in the past when you saw that, all of those things, actually scientists say there's about 30 different areas of your brain that make those kinds of decisions from 30 different places, and all of those come together and communicate and decide on what you think you saw, which is your reality. That's your reality. So if you will look at this screen, I'm going to see if I could give you a bigger picture of it. And I also realize that it looks like we're having some technical difficulties. So if you're missing part of this, within an hour and a half to 2 hours after we're done, this will be back on so that you can watch it again. So if you're missing any parts, continue to go through if you were trying to interact with us so that we can answer some questions. But you will get the whole of this because it's being recorded, and we'll repost it once we're done. But if you'll look at your screen there, my first question for you is: you see an A and you see a B. Which one of those is the darkest? Is it the A or is it the B? And so I'll wait for a couple of answers if you are getting this, and if you can respond. Which square is darkest, A or B? Can you see that too, honey?
Yes.
Okay. So which square would you say is the darkest, A or B? Which would you say, honey?
Just from looking at it, A.
Okay. And so A, is obviously it appears to be the darker of the two squares of all, between A and B. But and looking at this, A is darker to me too. But I know that we're both wrong. A and B are the same shades. And it's hard to make your mind believe that. A and B are the same shades. And that's what I mean by our mindset. It's our thoughts and our patterns from what your brain is telling you that they're different. And I'm going to show it to you in a minute that you'll see that they really are different. But your brain creates its own reality from what you see. So even with your choices that you've made concerning things that you eat because of what your family ate, because of all those things in your history, your brain takes what you see now and compares it with your knowledge. So you got a database of knowledge and database of images and database of smells and tastes. That was that was one of my dad's problems as far as trying to change his eating habits. He felt like, why should I, I'm not going to, I should be able to eat anything I want to eat. That's really the way he felt about it. I should be able to eat anything I want to eat. And that's based on the knowledge you've had, based on the things that you've eaten in the past, based on, anyway, your brain takes all of that information and it arrives at an interpretation, which is your own reality. Now, when you look at that, that square again, you see that A and that B. I'm going to show you because that A and B are influenced by all the other squares around it. If once I remove the other squares from around it, then you'll be able to see that A and B are the same color. They are the same shades. Squares A and B are actually the same shades. And it still took me a long time to really believe that. I took this image and printed. I printed it out big, and then I took it and I cut the A out and cut the B out. Because even when I printed it and looked at it, it still looked like A was darker than B. But once I physically took some scissors and cut the A out from among the other and cut the B out from among the other and put the A and the B right next to each other, they were the same shades. And it, even after doing that and looking at the image again, it's with all the other squares around it, the influence is so strong, and the image on my neurons are so, imprinted, that when I see it with all the other images around it, A looks darker than B. But technically, A is not darker than B. And so we make decisions based on things that are not based on, it's our reality, but it's not true. It's not based on your senses. Did you want to say something there, honey? Oh, I'm good? Okay. Then I'll switch back to me. Okay. And so what I want to turn to now is that God created the human body, and where it can maintain its own health. It needs a little help sometimes, but we need to renew our minds to what God's design is and participate with God's design. Participate with what God has created. If there are certain things that bother your body, because all of our bodies are different, if there are certain things that bother your body, then you need to look at what you're eating and what else is going on in your body so that you can address that, not just look for some medicine, because the medicine doesn't correct it. The medicine it doesn't cure it. It just keeps you from feeling the pain, or keeps you from, being able to do whatever, helps you to be able to do what you were doing. But you need to address the actual issues. So I want to share with you what David said in Scripture here, where David actually said in Psalms 139:3, David said this. He said, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." This is Psalms 139 and verse 13. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I really like the way this is shared in the New Living Translation, because what David is talking about is an embryo in the womb. He's saying God created him. He recognized that God did this and put him together even in his mother's womb. Look at how the New Living Translation says this. The New Living Translation says, it says, "For you created my inmost being." No, that's the New International Version. "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb." So God, you created everything. You did this all together. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And then the next verse, he said, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." He recognized that God made him complex. Now, you won't be able to see this, but God created us in such a way that I want to show you. What the miracle of human birth is really what I want to show you. Just what David is talking about, the miracle of human birth. When you look at fertilization, when the sperm meets the egg, there's genetic instructions from the mother and from the father that when they get together, it forms a zygote, and it's barely visible to the human eye, but that's the beginning of human birth and of human life. Now, look at this. Now, all of this information that I'm about to share with you is from the most used medical dictionary in the world, where Donald Vaines is the editor. I just wanted to share that. It's the 24th edition. Wanted to give you that information, so if you want to look it up yourself. But look at what happens around 2 weeks after fertilization. Around 2 weeks after fertilization, the child's first completed brain cells appear. That is amazing. In 2 weeks after fertilization, the brain cells appear. That's the first thing that starts to form, is the brain. And we learned this in a short illustration together. Thomasine and I did. The brain is the first part that's created when a person is born. That's what God created. The only person that was born that was created and not in stages like this was Adam and Eve. So ever since then, it took about 2 weeks to get a brain started, and then after your brain was started, then at 3 weeks, the preborn child's heart is in an advanced stage of formation. So in 3 weeks, the heart is starting to form. The eyes are beginning to form. Your spinal column is beginning to form. Your nervous system, they are virtually complete in 3 weeks. All of this is put together in 3 weeks, where this is all put together. Now, I want to jump down to like 7 weeks so you can just see. I want to move faster this. But at 7 weeks, the first fully developed neurons, in other words, your nerve cells, appear on top of your spinal cord, which is the construction of your brain stem. And it regulates all of your vital functions as far as your breathing, your heartbeat, your blood pressure. So when something goes wrong and we decide to get medicine, and we just think the medicine makes us feel better, but if it's not correcting the problem, we still got an issue that we need to resolve. Now look at what happens after 4 months. The preborn baby can grab things with its hands, can swim, can turn somersaults, and I guess some of you mothers are familiar with that happening on the inside of you. Their eyelashes are now present, and rapid eye movement, which means that they're dreaming. It can be recorded. That is amazing to me. That is amazing. And when you look at all of these things that are happening, just the miracle of birth, I want to move this on to the miracle of life. See, all of those things that happen is still intact. All of the nerve endings, all of the brain stems, and all of that, your nervous system that starts from your brain that created all of your other organs in your body, those brain cells, all of those things working together are still attached to the different organs that were created from that embryo. So your heart, your lungs, your liver, your everything, your spleen, everything, your limbs, everything was created from your brain. So if we don't keep things correct and healthy in our nervous system, we're still missing out on what real life is. So there are between 50 and 75 trillion cells in your body, and each type has its own lifespan. Now, when we look at the different lifespans that the cells in your body has, it's amazing to me. Now, you get new red blood cells about every 4 months, but every 4 months your red blood cells you got brand new ones. The ones that you had 4 months ago, they've died off, they're gone. White blood cells is a little different. White blood cells replace themselves about every year. And then when you look at your skin cells, you get a brand new skin about every 27 days. About every 27 days, your skin has replenished itself. So we are being renewed, as we go along. Here's one for you. Fingernails and toenail cells replace themselves about every 3 to 6 months. Now, this is something that we don't usually talk about, but when Thomasine was going through chemo, she lost her fingernails and her toenails, not toenails, fingernails, but they all changed color, became decolored, and lost her fingernails because of what the chemo actually does. Even though chemo killed cancer cells. Did you want to say anything about that, honey? Just the emotional side of that.
Well, I wanted to tie it into Psalm 139 when you were talking about David and how he's sharing about the wonder of how God created us. And he says, I will praise you, O God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I was meditating on that. And this scripture is even more alive to me now after going through side effects of chemotherapy and seeing the changes, the physical changes, and then seeing restoration, experiencing the restoration. Because when he says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, that really is talking about us being created in a way that is to bring respect, that's to bring awe and amazement. So when we see us, when we see each other, we should have an awareness and a respect and an awe for one another and for our own bodies. And that's exactly what I experienced, because to go from, honestly, some levels of devastation when you actually realize I'm not just talking about long fingernails. We're talking about nails, the fingernails, to the degree that you look down and you see your nail bed. You see what's underneath the fingernail. Mm-hmm. And you're unable to do the simplest thing, like pick up something small. You have to have somebody, I had to call Pastor Woody to do those kinds of things for me. And so when you go from having to allow the Lord to renew your mind, restore your soul every day, throughout the day, because when you look in the mirror, you don't recognize yourself as the person you knew, even though you know the real you is on the inside of this earthly shell. To go from that to seeing God day by day, day by day, day by day, restore me, has given me such an appreciation for. I'm so thankful for toenails and fingernails now, short or long. I'm just so thankful and so in awe of how God put in us what we need to be restored. And so this scripture is just so alive to me at this point. And it's amazing how David got that revelation from God so that we can now use it in our day-to-day situations where we are hanging in the balance. You know, even our minds, when we are hanging in the balance, is not always about physical health. Sometimes you're hanging in the balance with your finances. Sometimes things are hanging in the balance with your marriage, your relationship, concerns about your children, concerns about work, concerns about your community. And so we need to recognize that we are able to still thrive in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of chaos, because we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Another, to add to what you're just saying about that scripture, you know, when I think about fearfully and wonderfully made, when David said that, we should recognize that, even as Thomasine has said, you know, it when you look at the human body, I read where if you could see what's going on inside of your body, it would scare you so bad you just stand still. You know, if you could see all of the things that's going on in your body. For example, you know, all of our organs, including our skin, which is the largest organ that we have, but all of our organs, they are still connected to its original source as a 2-week-old embryo. That's what I wanted to get to. Your brain and spinal cord that came together then, all of our organs are still connected, and life is still being fed through to the rest of your bodies based on your connection and how healthy you are completely all over. Now, when you look at culture, for example, culture is a pattern. We mentioned this last week. Culture is a pattern of ideas, you know, and behaviors that we all share. And you don't realize when Paul was talking to this church at Corinth, he said, and I'm going to close this out. He said that in the 18th and 19th verse, he says, don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You don't belong to yourself. So when you are selfish and live your life just for you, you will make bad decisions for your health. You'll make bad decisions for your wealth, money, and everything else, your family and everything else. But Paul is saying, and we need to realize that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And it's not like, you know, in other words, God lives on the inside of us. but it's how we relate to other people. God wants us to relate to other people as if He's living on the inside of us, so that we don't have toxic relationships, and also so that we're healthy and we're not dying, too young. Too many people die way too young. Um, I was just talking to Thomasine yesterday or this morning, realizing that my dad just died way too young. Thomasine is now the age that my dad was when he died. She's older than he was when he passed away. And we need to make better choices when it comes to our health. He said, for God bought you with a price. That's what Paul said to them. God bought you with a high price. So you must honor God with your body. The key is honoring God with your body. So here's your challenge for today as we wrap this up. I want your challenge is to break away from the unhealthy patterns of whatever culture we've been in, and replace that with some life-sustaining practices. And as you think about that, I have a question for Thomasine. I know you've already asked some questions, and we've answered some questions as far as some of the changes we made in our food, our diet, even with our sleep. I mean, how important sleep is concerning your immune system. But I have a question for you, honey. How has your response to cancer and how other people respond to cancer impact your mission and your purpose? How does that impact, what you're doing right now in life?
Well, one thing it has done for sure is it's increased my passion, and I'll call it a righteous indignation just about disease, about sickness in general. It just hurts my heart when people suffer. And it has, I know it has made me more motivated to share my own testimony, because I realized going through all these decisions and the treatments and all of that this thing was bigger than Thomasine. It was bigger. It was an attack from the devil, but it was bigger than just an attack about me. It was an attack against the purpose that God has for my life. And so if He could steal my purpose, then He's done some damage. And the same thing is true for each one of us. And so I have become more aware. I've become more appreciative of every moment of life, of course. But I've become more determined to spread awareness however I can. I'm still, again, as I said earlier, in a restoration mode. So I'm trying to pace myself and not jump out there and do a lot of things before giving myself the proper self-care. And so I am determined to advocate wherever I can, whether it's one-on-one at this point or later on a broader scale. So whenever I can say, get your mammograms, get your colonoscopies, because that's another area where the enemy attacked my body. And again, I was not sick. Just went for a routine screening and learned that I had a huge polyp that necessitated removing part of my colon in 2014, a part of my small intestines, appendix, and some lymph nodes. Again, I was never sick. And so my doctors are often amazed, because they say you don't get sick. So my primary physician was shocked when my biopsy in 2012 came back positive. She said, because you never get sick. And so even my surgeon, the same surgeon that I had before, Dr. Lindsay Gold, who is awesome, she said to me this time, she said, you got at least 3 decades left in you. And I received that. And so God has used all of this to encourage me to go forth with my purpose. So it's emboldened me concerning learning as much as I can, sharing as much as I can, and recognizing that people need support and looking for ways to support them. So I'm just very passionate and excited about however I can impact this cancer thing. We need to all pray for the cure. We need
Mhm.
to pray for more money for research and all those things. And of course, we need to just cry out to the Lord for wisdom, knowledge for those that are engaged in looking for the cure, and whatever is holding up the information about the cure, that be unlocked,
Yes.
because the answer is there.
Yes. Amen. Amen. And I mean there are some theories about the answer. You know, some people believe, and I believe some of this, that there really is a cure, but our the culture of our finances as Americans and even the world is so big that anytime a big change that would come that would actually benefit everybody, if it would change the financial structure, then the powers that be don't want to make that. It is a big leap, but if you can learn things to do for yourself that you can do, then I suggest that you learn to do those things. And so that's what some of our action points are for you today. The first thought is, with our challenge of looking at whatever, breaking away from unhealthy patterns. That's the challenge. Break away from unhealthy patterns of our culture and place it with some life-sustaining practices and habits. But identify what you want to do is identify some unhealthy patterns that you have that appear to be okay, but they're unhealthy, and replace them with a healthy reality, just like that A and B square. Just like you see that, you look at that every time. If it's among all the other squares, you'll see that you'll say A is darker than B. But if you take them out by themselves, you'll see that they are the same shade. So we need to identify some of our unhealthy patterns. And so here's the first action that you can do this week. Identify at least 3 unhealthy foods that are a part of your weekly diet, and try replacing them with 1 or 2 healthy alternatives for 3 weeks. Just try it for 3 weeks. To make a decision to try this for 3 weeks. That and then after 3 weeks, then you may do like I do sometimes. For example, when I say I eat beef, typically the only beef I eat is what, honey?
A Whopper. A Whopper.
Typically the only beef that I'll eat is a Whopper, and that's almost cultural. When I moved back to Michigan and started spending time with my dad in our latter years, if we were somewhere, Dad would say, "Woody, I believe I want me a Whopper." And every now and then I just want a Whopper, and I'll go get me a hamburger. But identify at least 3 unhealthy foods that are not healthy for you, especially if you eat them, all the time, and replace them with some healthy alternatives. Thomasine and I have found some great alternatives when it comes to ice cream, which is one of my weaknesses. But I had to replace them. And every now and then I still want me some ice cream, and I'll get some. But it's not a normal part of our weekly diet like it used to be. I remember the time when every Sunday was our treat. We got yogurt, TCBY yogurt, and pecans. That was that was our treat. And so now we substitute that with something else. But here's number 2. Identify at least 1 unhealthy relationship, because that's something else that becomes toxic and puts stresses on your immune system. Identify at least 1 unhealthy relationship that impacts you mentally or emotionally, and decide to find a way to address the issue that's causing the pain. Not that you need to get rid of the person or cut them off. That may become necessary if it's a toxic relationship, but just identify 1 unhealthy relationship and decide that you're going to say something about it. You're going to do something about it. You're not going to be silent anymore. You're not going to just stuff your feelings anymore. Decide that this is it. I'm going to be healthy, and I'm going to take the step to be healthy.
Can I jump in for a second?
Sure, jump in.
One of the things that's coming up in my thoughts right now is that when we see people who are making these kinds of changes, many times we view them and think it's easy, as opposed to realizing that it really is a process, as Pastor Woody is saying, and that process is your mind has to get renewed. And again, when we're in these decision-making modes, these day-by-day decisions, we have to be intentional. And so when I talk about renewing the mind, we have to think differently about food. We have to think differently about our desires. We have to have a mental shift. And literally, sometimes I have to talk to the food. You know, I can remember at my former church, Pastor Tanya, I was telling her about once I was in the drugstore and I wanted these turtles so bad because I love turtles. And I was going to get this chocolate. I had to talk my way out of the drugstore. And I mean, literally, Thomasine, leave the store. Thomasine, leave the store. Sometimes I'll look at something and I'll tell it, you are not my friend. And it may sound crazy, but it helps me renew my mind. It helps me position myself for a decision. And this is something Mike Murdoch said. Present pain for long-term gain. And so we have to think long-term, which is what you've been emphasizing, Pastor Woody. Present pain, long-term gain. And so we got to stop thinking short-term, especially when it comes to food.
Awesome. Man, that was good. Let me go to the next point because we got to get out of here. We got to go. The next one is identify at least one thing that's causing you to stress at work. Even if you don't know how to address the issue now, just decide that you're going to break this pattern. You're going to figure out a way to break this pattern, whether you got to talk to a manager or just talk to a professional. You may need to talk to a minister, but you need to talk to somebody so that you can figure out how to deal with the stress of what's going on. So even if you don't know how to address it yet, identify it, at least one thing that's causing you some stress at work. And then the last thing here is decide to live healthy one day at a time. Yes. Live healthy one day at a time, one decision at a time, breaking the norms and establishing new ways of being healthy so that your life is not hanging in the balance. One of the things we didn't talk a lot about when it comes to health is this, and I'm going to close this out with this, is physical exercise and how important it is. There's an event that happens in Flint for all the rest of you that are listening to us every year, and it's called the Crim Race. And we're usually way involved, and many of you, and myself included, made decisions about, doing the Crim. And I remember the first time I decided to do it, I had some issues with my back, and I couldn't do it. And then for 2 years, I was able to do it. I did the 10-mile. But it's a goal to set that keeps you working on it all year long, that keeps you fit. And so I want to celebrate some people. I asked some of you to send me some pictures yesterday. I asked some of you to send me some pictures of you or someone else that you were supporting or whatever in the Crim. And so I want to share some of those as we close out today, because physical exercise is definitely important. You got to keep moving. These are some people. Congratulations. I won't call out any names just in case you don't want me to. And so, but I just show the pictures that you shared and that you sent me. And so these are awesome. I think you guys are doing an awesome job taking care of your bodies. Just as Paul said, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Knowing that this temple, you need this temple. You need it functional. You need to be able to use it. And so I'm excited to see some of you making decisions, at least, in this case, you're letting the whole world know that you've made some decisions about your body and you're going to live healthy. And so, again, at Grace Transformational Ministries, we're saying congratulations to all of you, whether you are part of GTM or not. We are excited about your decision to be healthy, to live healthy, to do healthy things, to get involved and different things. And I know a lot of these people, because I race with some of them and run with some of them in the past. This year I've been doing more biking because of the issues that I've had, and so but I had to keep moving, keep exercising, and so. But thank you again for sending in these pictures, and congratulations. And again, live healthy. Here's a case where this one mother got her kids involved, and so get the whole family out there so that everybody can see that we need to be healthy, and we can be. We can make that decision and how to live healthy. So we've run way out of time. I just want to pray for you right now and